Michele Gomez is back playing Missy for a brand new spin-off series of adventures with Big Finish, as today we'll be taking a look at the conveniently named Missy Series 1. Now, when Big Finish got the new series licence, I do believe way back in 2015-2016, it was only a matter of time before they get the licence to use the 12th Doctor era characters, and when they eventually did, it was of course only expected that we would eventually get a series starring Michele Gomez as the latest incarnation of the Master. And that is exactly what I'm going to be taking a look at today. Of course, previously, Missy has already appeared in the Diary of River Song Series 5. She appeared in one episode alongside River Song, which I have in fact already reviewed that box set, so I certainly recommend checking it out if you haven't already. It is in fact the first episode, meaning that I do cover that episode within the first few minutes. This box set is completely dedicated to her character. It is essentially the War Master equivalent to the Missy incarnation. It is a spin-off completely dedicated to her, with an antagonist being in the main role. So first off, and as always, in the description below, I will leave the link to go and buy this release from the Big Finish website. It is currently out now at the pre-order price of £23 for the physical box set and £20 for the download. After April 2019, it will be going up to the normal recommended retail of £35 for the physical box set and £30 for the download. And as per usual, if you are interested by what I say throughout this review, you can also check out all of the story details, casting information and technical details on the Big Finish website, as well as taking a look at the trailer that is also available on the official Big Finish YouTube channel. So the physical box set for this product, I do believe, is in fact one of those slimmer cases that was used on the Bernie Summerfield new series, The Master of Callous, as well. It's a lot more space saving and convenient, so it's not a 4-pack box set, much like the 8th Doctor adventures that we are normally more used to. So as I was saying earlier, this box set is in fact split into 4 adventures, the first of which is A Spoonful of Mayhem, as written by Roy Gill. The second episode is Divorce, Beheaded, Regenerated, as written by John Dorney. Episode 3 is The Broken Clock, as written by Nev Fountain, and then the series finale is The Belly of the Beast, as written by Jonathan Morris. The whole box set is directed by Ken Bentley, the producer is David Richardson, the script editor is Matt Fitton, and as per usual, the executive producers are Nicholas Briggs and Jason Haig-Ellery. So before I even get on to the actual stories themselves, talking about Missy as a character, of course played by Michele Gomez, she is arguably the most controversial incarnation of the Master. Even taking over Eric Roberts as a character is much different to the other personalities of the Master. However, something that I covered in the Diary of River Song review is that the different incarnations are so different in their approach. Of course, with the Doctor, you are very much used to different personalities. However, with the Master, is almost a little bit more obvious of that change in personality. You can always tell with the Doctor that it is the same person underneath. However, especially with Missy's incarnation of the Master, you do kind of wonder if there's a little bit of a different thought process going on underneath, and she necessarily isn't as evil as she used to be. She is just still, or even a little bit more, psychotic than normal. Now, in my personal opinion, Missy in the actual 12th Doctor era was an unusual character. I did quite like her throughout different stories. I loved how psycho she was, and I felt that quite a lot of her moments were actually quite funny. I thought that she was written in a way that was quite deadpan and serious, and you could kind of tell when she's about to kill a certain person in the room. And I did quite like that about the incarnation. However, at the same time, I kind of struggled to refer to her as an incarnation of the Master, simply because she is completely different from the other incarnations, and I still see her more as a new incarnation of, say, the Rani or another female type of Time Lord, as opposed to the Master, who has always seemed to be that stereotypical moustache comic book villain that we've had since the early classic series. When Big Finish got permission to use Michele Gomez's character, what did I want to see? I wanted to see Big Finish actually develop Missy from that character that we've seen within the TV show. I think that it was incredibly clear that Missy kind of went off and had her own adventures, and there was quite a lot of mystery behind her character. You didn't really know what she did behind closed doors when the Doctor wasn't around, and I suppose that this box set is kind of providing insight into that, and I think that it is very clear that Big Finish certainly wanted to be concerned consistent with the character that we've seen within the TV show, and that is something that is prominent throughout all 4 stories. She is very much the same character as to what appeared on TV, and I am still yet to see Big Finish actually make Missy their own. I want them to kind of develop her character a little bit further, and maybe even give her a bit more justice. I think that she needs to be just a little bit more evil, or maybe tested a little bit more, and I just generally think that at the minute it's sort of more comedic than completely psycho, and I still maybe struggle a little bit to actually see her as the Master. And of course this box set did have the additional pressure, because if you've seen my previous reviews you will of course know that I really did enjoy the War Master box sets, being Only the Good and Master of Callus. That is another Master spin-off completely dedicated to Derek Jacobi's War Master. This box set is essentially exactly the same format to that. It is another spin-off dedicated to another incarnation of the Master, one of which has Derek Jacobi, a highly favoured English actor, and then the other one has Michele playing an already controversial version of the Master, so I think that both of them kind of go to different places when it comes to the Master and his different personalities. Taking a look at the first episode, we have A Spoonful of Mayhem as written by Roy Gill. Now this episode is set within Victorian London, and it is pretty much a expected story for Michele Gomez as Missy, simply because I'm surprised the actual TV show didn't do it. Of course, when we first got the reveal of the costume, it was very obvious that she was inspired by a Victorian nanny, or somebody like Nanny McPhee, kind of a very psychopathic, evil version of Nanny McPhee, and then it just makes complete sense that this story is in fact a Victorian episode where Missy becomes a nanny to some Victorian children. It's something that is very specific to her character, and certainly something that you wouldn't see with, say, Derek Jacobi or Roger Delgado, so I do kind of like that, the way that they're making this box set incredibly personal to her character, and I think that the stories definitely follow a similar format to Missy and her personality. They are incredibly fast-paced, and they are all very new series and hyperactive, and I think that the soundtrack and the design generally around them is certainly very reminiscent of that. So in the episode we are introduced to 2 characters who are brother and sister. We have Oliver Clement, who plays Oliver Davis, and then we have his sister as played by Bonnie Kingston, who's called Lucy Davis. I thought that they were a nice inclusion in the actual story. I think that the actor and actresses, they were nice. I enjoyed them, however at the same time I did think that their portrayals, or at least their characters, were a little bit irritating. I standard Victorian child from kind of a wealthy-ish backdrop. I kind of felt like at some moments they were a little bit over expositionary. They were mentioning a lot of the plot and a lot of the visuals of what was going on. Normally with Big Finish they have a very technical way of dealing with visuals and kind of sliding in visual description into the actual script. This story just seemed to spoon feed what was going on right in front of them into the listener's brain, which was a little bit of a shame. It didn't really put me off too much, but yeah, it may be nice to see that toned down just a little bit. There is also a rather unusual moment where Oliver's character in fact becomes a narrator, and he voices over a little bit of the story explaining what is going on, and I thought that this would have been explained in the later half of the episode. However, from what I kind of understood, it wasn't, which left it a little bit of a mystery in my head as to who he was actually talking to and presenting the story to. A very similar thing also applies to Missy, where I think the script is also kind of aware that the listener has kind of hopped onto this episode mid-adventure, because essentially through scene 2, Missy actually jumps out of the scenario, pauses the story and talks to the viewer in order to catch them up, and I thought that that would have been a theme that was reoccurrent throughout the whole box set. I thought that Missy would have been almost a narrator that was talking about the different characters. However, once again, it was only used once, and I kind of felt that was a little bit jarring, or it was once again a bit unexplained, but I do still like the story. I think that generally it's a nice way to introduce the box set, very fast-paced and easy to understand, and that whole idea of involving Victorian London, it makes a lot of sense. We have Missy taking the children on several adventures in order to complete her plan, basically involving the London Underground, which I'm very happy to see, because I like the London Underground. I don't know why, I have a fascination with it, but there was a bit of a link with the Circle Line and her trying to get a device or gem that was able to be used to power her vortex manipulator manipulate her so she can get out of the grasp of the alien of the story, as voiced by Dan Starkey, of course, who did also play Strax, and basically he plays a lawyer, an alien lawyer that is also a alien bat creature. And it baffled me, this point of the story, because we have these bats who have captured Missy because she is at risk of actually damaging their future of the Bat People's race, so they think that containing her and trying to counsel her on how to be a good person will kind of change the course of events, which clearly they do not know that they are currently keeping a renegade Time Lord that is a psychopath and likes killing people in captivity, and they quite obviously will not be able to change her mind, and that is seen by the very end of the story. But once again, I did find that a bit odd, but it was quite an enjoyable episode and a nice way to actually introduce this box set. Very good for new series viewers, very easy to understand, and yet a nice smooth adventure. And then we move on to episode 2, which is Divorced, Beheaded, Regenerated, as written by John Dorney. Now, of course, a Big Finish regular. Now, I was previously unaware that this episode is in fact essentially a Missy versus Meddling Monk from the Time Meddler, of course, a First Doctor story as played by Rufus Hound. Now, I've had one run-in with the Meddling Monk in the past, and that was in fact, I do believe, Doom Coalition 4, and it was one one-hour story called The Side of Angels, and it had the same incarnation of the Meddling Monk, and I was really intrigued by his character. I thought that Rufus Hound did a very good job. He is a very good interpretation of the Meddling Monk. However, due to the angels being a part of the story, he was almost a little bit overshadowed, as well as the fact that it is essentially the climax of Doom Coalition, so at that point there was a lot going on, to say the least. So it's nice to have another episode with him in that is a bit more laid back, a bit more easy to follow, and allows more time for his character to almost blossom. And having a story that is the Meddling Monk with Missy is basically absolute genius. It is an absolutely phenomenal relationship. It is a great, bizarre, theatrical story because both of the characters are so different yet so similar at the same time. You have the psychopathicness and evilness of Missy compared to that of her intelligence, and then you have the Meddling Monk who basically wants to disrupt time because he's a meddler and he just wants to do it for the fun of it, and he's also a bit amateur at the same time. And Missy wants to use a component from his TARDIS in order to basically fix her own, and there is this whole complicated system where the Meddling Monk doesn't in fact trust her, and he is in fact also being Henry VIII because he wants to disrupt time as much as possible in order to get Gallifrey's attention, in order for them to come and get him and basically take him back home, because he decided to escape the Time War by fleeing to Earth, I do believe in the early sort of Tudors. And that whole idea of basically this relationship between both the Master and the Meddling Monk, actually seeing them both together is a great novelty. We've never had that before, and I think that it's just one of those episodes that is a lot of fun both to listen to, as also at the same time I imagine that it was great fun to actually write and record. And of course, dedicating a little bit of time to Rufus Hound, who does of course portray the Meddling Monk, I think that it is very, very clear that Rufus Hound absolutely adores his job. I think that every single time that he's appeared, from what I have heard, he seems to be defining the monk more and more, giving him more character and more depth. I think that is certainly something that is very good for an incarnation of a Time Lord that we don't particularly see too often. We just see certain fractions of their character almost splintered throughout different adventures. Of course, I love the fact that he has been involved within a historical setting. It is very much harking back to the Time Meddler, his original story. I love the fact that he is almost an amateur Time Lord that is very much around his home settings. Of course, in this episode, he is in a monastery, much like how he was within his first episode, and Missy kind of takes the mick out of him for that because he is kind of a little bit shy and a bit awkward, but also at the same time rather loud and likes to be the centre of attention. He's very multi-personality, but not in the way of the 11, because he is incredibly multi-personality, all 11 of them. But yeah, the Meddling Monk is a really good character, and I generally think that he bounces off Missy really well and just makes the story even more entertaining. Of course, naturally, for me personally, I do really enjoy historical adventures, and this one is much different to that of a historical Doctor Who story, because with historical Doctor Who, you have that whole idea of keeping timelines in check and making sure that everything is okay and how it should be, and then you have a Doctor Who spin-off that has a much different way of tackling the situation, and you essentially have, let's disrupt the timelines as much as possible, try and create a lot of attention, basically get these time-eating sort of aliens involved. We have references to the Reapers, and then also at the same time whack in another set of villains that basically like to collect and preserve historical figures, and they try to track down the Meddling Monk as Henry VIII, thinking that he is the real king, and of course we have a whole situation with that. And basically the whole story is one big massive fairy tale. It is bizarre, it is weird, and it's the wedding of both the Meddling Monk and the Master together. Would you ever think of having those two walking down the aisle together? Well, this story presents that, and I can't quite believe it. It's almost a bit of a dream, but it's an odd episode. Much like with the first story, where we had the Wardens and that alien bat race, and their quite naive attitude to thinking that they could change the way that Missy thinks, this episode once again has that rather similar villain of these people who want to collect historical figures. And I thought that was lovely, it was a nice novelty, but also at the same time, the sheer fact that we actually had the reference to the Reapers in this story, it kind of made me feel like, wouldn't have this episode been even more epic if we had Missy, the Meddling Monk, and then to throw in there, because the Meddling Monk has disrupted time, let's have the Reapers, because Big Finish have never used the Reapers as of yet they have been referenced in a number of stories, so it would be nice to maybe include them, perhaps in the Time War. It kind of makes sense to include them because it's the Time War and it is completely down to disrupting time, so it would be nice to see them have a little cameo or something, but I certainly think that maybe including them in this story might have bulked it out a little bit more, because certainly around the middle half I did think it could have had a bit of a lull in where it wasn't as exciting, but I think the general scripting itself is probably some of the best of this entire box set, because you have the moments where Missy is revealed to the Meddling Monk, where he thinks that he is going to meet Beatrice, which is the next in line to being Henry VIII's wife, and that turns out to be Missy, and he in fact spits out his drink, and it is incredibly funny. And then also just that banter, as much as I hate the word, banter between the two characters really well, and create a really captivating and intriguing story that is great fun to listen to. The next episode of the box set is The Broken Clock, as written by Nev Fountain. Now, the previous two episodes in this box set have so far been rather standard Big Finish. You have an episode that's a historical, well, you in fact have two historical stories, where you have a villain and then the Time Lords coming in. It's all quite standard and regular Doctor Who. This episode is kind of one of the reasons why I like Big Finish, because they do the wild and bizarre, and something that you wouldn't see within the TV show. And The Broken Clock by Nev Fountain is one of those stories, because we see the whole episode and its framework being based around a American drama documentary, where you have crimes being solved, you have reconstructions, and basically you have that over-the-top narrator as well as these over-the-top construction actors that are recreating the scene in order for the viewer or listener to actually visualise the crime and the scene, what is going on. And this episode sees that very much take place. You have the idea of America's Most Impossible Killers as presented by Dick Zodiac, and you have this sequence of events that is some serial killings all around the area of Manhattan, you have some gang crime, you have a collector, you have a security guard, and all of these deaths have in fact been linked by a grandfather clock that has gone missing. And you are introduced to this story through the eyes of a security guard in this TV show, and the whole episode starts as if it is a crime-solving American documentary, and I was really intrigued by this. It instantly got you hooked within the scenario, because it is not a regular Doctor Who format, and it is something that could very easily be done in new series Doctor Who. However, I kind of feel like they are scared to, because it is not the standard style that you expect from a Doctor Who story, and I love the way that you have this whole build build-up and this whole environment of a TV show, and then all of a sudden that is completely smashed to pieces by Michelle Gomez walking in and basically being Missy and saying, "You're pathetic, you're really bad, your Scottish accent is terrible," and then basically killing the actress on the spot. And then she takes the reconstruction actors into the actual scenario and they become a part of history in order to try and solve the serial killings. And you have this whole idea of a security guard that she refers to as the not dead yet one, because he is eventually going to be killed, and the whole story is one of those episodes where the main antagonist knows more than she is explaining. However, the viewer is left in the dark. You don't quite know what is going on and you are constantly guessing what is going to happen next, and it is rather unpredictable, I must admit, and I think that the format is probably one of the main reasons why this episode works so well. In this story as well, Missy decides to change name to D.I. Missy Masters, which is incredibly over top, much like how the presenter is called Dick Zodiac, and we also have a few other rather stereotypical American figures in there as well, because everything is so exaggerated. So if you don't like stereotypes, or if you don't like over-the-top American documentaries, this episode may not be for you. I do imagine that it is probably quite a niche story, but I do like the way that this episode in fact introduces certain components of Missy's past as well as her future technically as well. You have Big Finish essentially trying to establish the relationship between Missy and her TARDIS and the whereabouts of the TARDIS, and I'm not really going to go into it too much because I will leave that for you to find out, but I think that it would be fair to say that the TARDIS is involved, or at least the Master's TARDIS is involved within this story, however not in the extent that you may expect. I'm not going to say much else about it because I think that most of it is good to leave up to mystery, but it is probably my favourite episode of the box set, closely tied with Divorced, Beheaded, Regenerated, because this episode is what I come to Big Finish for, those experimental and bizarre stories, and I kind of love Divorced, Beheaded, Regenerated for a very similar reason. It is bizarre, but also at the same time it's historical and thoroughly enjoyable, so those two are certainly my top for this box set. And now we move on to the fourth and final story of Missy Series 1, and it is The Belly of the Beast, as written by Jonathan Morris. Now this episode is rather risky, because this episode features the Master on a colony world that is rather similar to Earth, and features said colony world people actually trying to dig for minerals. And the reason why that is risky is because it is a very similar concept to what was used in The Master of Callus with Derek Jacobi, and for those of you that have seen that review, you'll of course know that I thoroughly enjoyed that box set. It is incredibly good. And originally I was worried when we first got introduced to the characters and the setting. I was concerned that this story was basically going to be a complete copy of that episode in The Master of Callus, just with a different version of the Master. However, this episode does do something a little bit different. You have the involvement of clones in there, and you do also have these people from the colony world taking on a rather Scottish sounding personality, which is nice considering that Missy is of course Scottish herself. And I think that this episode is possibly some of the best psychopathic references that we've had for Missy as a character. I think that the actual narrative itself and the script and scenery isn't necessarily the best. I think that the episode 2 and 3 of the box set certainly beat it for its actual location, but at the same time Missy in this episode is really nicely represented, and I love the way that she is in fact written in this episode to have complete disregard for basically other people's lives. You have the whole idea of them essentially destroying clones and then leaving clones to die, killing people left, right and centre, and then at the very end of the story we also have another thing that occurs that is once again very similar to that. So I do like the way that it shows Missy's colder side, and the way that she in fact essentially employs a whole world in order to do her dirty work simply because she's got her TARDIS into a little bit of trouble. It has been eaten by a monster master that has eventually over time been poisoned. The monster has died, rocks have sort of formed around it, it's eventually became a planet, and these clone people need to dig underground in order to get her TARDIS back out again. So it is using people, it's manipulative. And this episode, as well as a few references in the previous stories, also include a few references to hypnotism in there as well. It was an idea that was also focused on quite a lot in The Broken Clock, which I think is interesting. It didn't directly reference to I am the master and you will obey me. It sort of mentioned the word obey, but it didn't do the full thing. So I'm wondering why Big Finish are referencing the hypnotism idea and the fact that the master has these mind powers, however they are not utilising it as much yet. Not directly, so I'm waiting for the future in order for them to do more of that. Because this episode is also a clone-based story, you do have essentially Michelle Gomez meeting Michelle Gomez. This episode, as well as The Broken Clock, also sees Michelle actually doing a number of different accents for a number of different people, which I think once you've got Michelle Gomez doing a story, you may as well do as many impressions as possible, and that is exactly what is seen throughout this box set. And I think that one of the key differences with Missy in this episode, for example, is the quotes and jokes that are used in The Belly of the Beast are in fact funny. They hit every single mark, actually quite sly and psycho and deadpan. Once again, it works. The Big Finish writers have got a very good job of actually making her character funny but dark at the same time. It's a great balance between the two. However, with Missy in the TV show, quite a lot of the jokes didn't work. She was seen quite a lot as very over the top and dramatic and very theatrical, which yes, a few of those characteristics are shown in the other stories in this set. However, they are used more effectively than in the TV stories. Of course, the very end of this story does see Missy eventually getting control of her TARDIS once more by using the component from the Monk's TARDIS, so I do like the way that this episode does almost cap off the whole box set. It ties together a few of the loose ends and kind of makes Missy's plan all unfold into one nice neat package, and I think that it is a nice series finale story. However, at the same time, it didn't have too much impact behind it. I did enjoy it, I suppose, maybe wanted to see a few more whoa moments in there, and I'm still yet to see that moment with Big Finish where they really sell Missy as an incarnation of the Master to me, which I suppose it is only early days. So overall, for the Doctor Who Big Finish new series box set Missy Series 1, I think that as far as introductions go, this box set shows a lot of potential. I think that all four stories in this set do portray a nice amount of variety. Of course, we have 3 episodes that are based on Earth in 3 different locations. You have Manhattan, you have Tudor England, and then you have Victorian London in there as well, which is nice. It's good to have that variety. And then you also have that off-world episode to end off the box set as well. I think that it does almost have that new series style in there, being all of the episodes are fast-paced, very much of the personality of Missy, and it is using the character that is seen within the 12th Doctor era from series 8, 9 and 10. It is very consistent to her. She is jokey, but also at the same time you don't trust her because she's evil. She has a few of those traditional master elements in there. However, I don't want Big Finish to do a simple replication of that character from the TV show. Big Finish are normally used to improving characters and making storylines that fill in the different gaps. So for the next Missy box set, because I think that it is inevitable that we will get more at some point, I want to see Big Finish develop that further. I think that this box set has certainly shown that now you've got Missy on board. Michelle Gomez works thoroughly well in the audio drama format. Let's make this incarnation of the Master do some really dark stuff. Let's challenge this incarnation. I think that a perfect way to include Missy in a box set would be basically something that was left for Big Finish to do in the actual series itself, the end of which is familiar, where you have the Daleks and Missy almost forming that alliance, have Missy and the classic Daleks together, show exactly what went down in that story, because it is clear that Missy goes off and does her own things, and I just want to see that. I want to have more impact, and I want to leave these box sets having the experience that I get from the War Master, which I think that at the minute War Master is kind of the classic equivalent of the Master, and then the Missy box set is almost the new series equivalent to that. It is more light-hearted, but still has its darker moments, but is a lot easier to listen to for the new listeners to Big Finish, which I certainly do like. So do be warned, if you're a new series listener or a new listener to Big Finish, this box set is possibly great for you, especially if you like Missy as a character. However, if you are a classic fan who likes more complex box sets, then this might be one that is worth avoiding, especially if you do not like Missy as a character, because this box set is entirely dedicated to her. So overall, a good box set, does show potential, it is really entertaining, did have quite a lot of laughs, very well written. Michelle Gomez is absolutely standout, and I can't wait to see what Big Finish do with her character in the future. And hopefully we see more of those stories creeping in that Big Finish are known for, being experimental and fourth wall breaking, such as a broken clock as seen in this box set. So thank you very much for watching this review. I hope you have enjoyed it. If you have any questions about Missy Series 1, then please do leave them in the description below, and I will reply to them at some point in the near future, along with if you have any other questions about Big Finish as a whole. I hope you've enjoyed this review, and do stay tuned for more Doctor Who content every single week on this channel as per usual. So yeah, thank you very much, and I shall see you all next time. Bye for now.